Welcome back to another episode of The Founder, a show that features entrepreneurs and their early stories of ingenuity, struggle, and perseverance to get their companies off the ground. We do our best to capture the uncensored, uncovered look behind the curtain into what founders really face when getting started. I'm your host, Kallaway. Our founder guest on today's episode went to school for fashion design and had moved to LA to work for several big fashion houses and startups, including Marc Jacobs, BCBG Max Sazria, and Yeezy. As a production manager at Yeezy, she found herself working long hours traveling all over to different manufacturing facilities. In the middle of a super hot day, she felt so uncomfortable with her bra that she took it off during work. After feeling embarrassed and annoyed, she made it her mission to create lingerie that didn't distract her from her day. And that's how Titov was born. Today at Titov, this founder and her team set out to make modern lingerie that's comfortable and fun. They operate under a mentality that underwear should work for you, not against you, and drive a positive experience to support you during the day. They use high-quality, sustainable materials and offer non-restrictive sizing with the option for made-to-order. As a special offer, this founder is giving our listeners 15% off their first order. Use code FOUNDER at checkout to get the discount. This is an inspiring interview that highlights the challenges of launching an apparel brand in 2020. And when all else fails, you just gotta keep going. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Now introducing the founder of Titov, Masha Titova. Let's get it. Masha, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about Titov. So what I like to do is before we dive into kind of your background and how you got started, can you just provide a little bit of an anchor point for Titov and kind of where the company is today? So what's your mission, vision, products you sell, size, things like that?
Yeah, we are all about providing a product for those who want something different. And I'm just really, really inspired by having basically underwear is like your first layer. So in the morning, I want to be excited to start getting dressed. And especially if you have like a harder to find size, you probably are only stuck with your basic average blacks and nudes and just really dull lingerie. So I wanted to have like a really fun experience for everyone to be able to get dressed and just have a good mood to start your day.
Totally. That's a great anchor point, and I think will help like as people start to listen and kind of get anchored around what the brand kind of is and does. But can we kind of rewind the clock a bit? Walk us through your life and background leading up to starting Titov.
Yeah. So my background has always been in the apparel industry. I went to school for fashion design and I had moved out to Los Angeles, worked for a bunch of startups and larger corporations, did everything from sales to production to branding to email marketing. I mean, you name it. The big thing that I did was definitely domestic and international production. I feel like that's my absolute expertise. And basically what ended up happening was I would be in LA and it's really hot in LA and I'd be running around factories and I'd be pulling 12 to 16 hour days, weekends, you name it. And every day, halfway through the day, I'd be miserable and wanting to take my bra off because something's poking and digging and just being so active, it just wasn't helping. And I would then start wearing sports bras, but then again, it's like that, like in the morning, I don't want to put on a sports bra. Like I'm not going to go work out, but I feel like that's the only thing I was comfortable in. And the more and more time that kind of went by and asking friends, do you have a brand that you like? And everyone just kind of gives you that, it's just this thing that you have to put on, like, but no one has this brand that they love. And I kept thinking, I do production. I don't get it. I should start to at least research and see why it's not available right now. And the more I started researching, I was like, oh, this is actually really hard.
Yeah.
And I started to realize why brands aren't doing it, because it's really hard to have inventory of sizes that goes beyond the typical 5 size range, just between like warehousing and inventory issues and fit issues. And bras are like the only piece of apparel that actually has to support something. Everything else kind of just drapes on you. the more and more I looked into it, I was like, wow, this is really hard. And that kind of was also why I decided to go into it, because I was like, if it is hard, then less people are going to go into it. So if I can really do a fantastic job making a great bra, I felt like I could help a lot of women and actually kind of hit a niche in the market as well.
And what about and we'll get into this too, and like how you approach prototyping and actually scaling out building out the product, but what about the material or design or structure is unique in Titov that kind of separates it from all the other options?
So I've had so many bras where elastics just pop and rip and they just don't make it through washes. So I've done wear testing for so many different brands and so many different materials and trims. I hate it when like the metal tarnishes and then it turns your skin and your clothing green, because it's just bad quality. So I've really tried to find the top materials, avoid anything that will make you itch. One of my big brand, I won't say the name, they had a bra that was kind of like all the rage a few years ago. I had finally bought one. I was like, yes, great, can't wait. Took about 2 hours. I had full irritations, almost to the point of bleeding, because the thread was just, it wasn't a lingerie thread. It wasn't like a silky. It was just hard. The way that they stitched it, it was digging into like my collarbone. It was awful. So I have like researched every type of thread. I have a specific like woolly nylon backing. So everything that touches your skin is the softest possible materials, but also it still needs to support. So I have to find that supportive elastic that is still soft. And those two things don't usually go together. So it's always like a battle trying to find it.
And I'd love you to talk more about like the process to come up with that first prototype or first like batch of a couple that I'm sure you were the first tester, then you had some of your friends test.
Yeah.
Can you talk through like a lot of people come up with ideas for either physical or digital products, and then, they don't really know how to take the first 10 steps to actually come up with a physical prototype. You obviously have done that and much, much more. Can you talk through like what that process looked like?
Yeah, so basically because I knew that sports bras were comfortable, I started researching what about sports bras bra materials made them so comfortable. And because I have a design background, I also know how to pattern draft and sew. I just started ripping them apart and basically like recreating sports bras to look more like an everyday bra, and then researching fabrics that would also be as soft as a sports bra, but look more like lingerie fabric. So I would just buy materials, source everything through, kind of Frankenstein it together. And then finally, once I'd be like, wait, okay, this is the right material, and then this is the right fit, I'd start to draft it. And there's probably 20 plus samples that I have personally sewed, adjusted, refit. Then once I got like my size down, I was like, okay, I think this is the one. I think this is the winner. I'll make it for another friend that's a completely different size, like much bigger and then much smaller, and just try to get a good size range, send it to them, be like, okay, this per my calculations should be your size, but can you tell me if it actually fits? Because I've also done all of the grading. So like if anyone doesn't know what grading is, that's how you make something from an extra small to a medium to a large. So for all of my sizes, I've done the grading like by hand, made sure each size is fit to the correct person that knows their size. So it was a long process. And even now, when I'm adding another size, I still send it to another friend and they'll be like, oh man, everything's great, but that back clasp is just too small. It needs to be a 3-hook instead of a 2-hook. And the moment I switch it out, I send it to a few other people and everyone's like, oh, thank God it's a 3-hook. Oh, it's so good. It supports. It's good. So there's always kind of iterations and updates whenever possible. But yeah, I mean, I have done all of it. I know a lot of people that don't sew, they usually have to outsource that and have someone else sew it and someone else do the pattern drafting, but that can cost so much money for every iteration. So I'm really lucky that I knew how to do it myself.
Yeah, I feel like being able to do everything early on it makes you so agile. Like you can flip through different ideas and patterns so much faster. Totally. Were you doing that at night after your like day job, or had you quit at that point and were like chasing this?
Yes. So I started kind of researching, asking questions, kind of surveying everyone and anyone during my day job, sourcing fabrics, driving around LA to every lingerie store and just looking at the construction and trying to understand what's the typical construction, what seems right, what kind of machines would you need to even sew a bra, and that would be during my day job. I'm originally from the East Coast, so I was also reaching a point where I was no longer into living in LA. There were kind of a lot of things that I was like, I need to move, and I'm also kind of doing this thing, and I just was like, okay, I'll move to New York, I'll get a job and continue doing this kind of nights and weekends. And amazingly, my family was kind of like, well, if you're already going to do the whole trip back, you might as well detour to Boston and come home and then do this full time. They were like, you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage. Like, if you want to do this,
Yeah,
do
take your
it
shot.
now. Yeah. So now I'm in Boston, and that's kind of how that all happened. But yeah, a lot of prototyping I was still doing while I was working full time. I took a bra making retreat for a weekend. It's like a bunch of ladies that learn how to sew bras, and it was fabulous. But the woman that runs it is just, her brain is incredible. The amount of women she's fit throughout her lifetime is so amazing, and like, she makes custom bras and just knows everything about it. So I just try to soak up all of that information while I was there. But yeah, so it wasn't until I moved back to Boston that I started to do this full time.
I don't want to gloss over. So you worked for a lot of different fashion houses, one of them
Mhm.
being Yeezy. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, as an outsider to the fashion industry, and I'm sure most of the listeners are, like, what were the things that you learned throughout your experiences working at these different fashion houses versus things that you had no idea you would need to do that you've now experienced with Titov?
Oh God, yeah. um, I worked at startups and then larger corporations, so it was good because I realized that I was definitely more of a startup mentality. I like to kind of be a part of everything and kind of enjoy learning as I go and getting things thrown at me. When I was at BCBG Max Azria, it was very like, there has to be a signature for everything, paper trail, very corporate. Everyone has their specific job. No one can really help. So I kind of quickly learned that that wasn't really for me. And even though Yeezy is a huge company, they definitely had a startup mentality. And I would definitely say that learning production, I mean, everything from shipping the products to generating UPC codes to how warehousing works, how domestic versus international works, all of that, it was unbelievable being able to learn that, learning how showrooms are set up and how buyers are being treated and how you kind of talk to them and try to get them to have your stuff. But the things that I wish I had, or maybe like a job that I wish maybe even for 6 months I would have had, that I kind of didn't realize I really would have needed when starting this, is anything on the lines of like PR and sales, basically getting that customer and getting in front of that customer and getting people to talk about you. And I kind of wish I had some sort of background in that, because it's been basically going in blindly with that.
Yeah, and that's a good kind of segue to a question I had around like how you distribute the product and sell the product today. Are you primarily like online D2C where customers find your website, or are you trying to sell like wholesale to major brands and retailers?
Yeah, so it started off as direct to consumer, and this is kind of where that realization of, oh, just because I know how to make the product doesn't mean it's gonna sell. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have all my stuff. I'm gonna put up this Squarespace website, and like, I'm
Yeah,
just gonna
people are just
sell a
gonna
bunch
come.
of stuff. Yeah. And that is not what happened. And I very quickly learned that Facebook advertising is gonna be way too expensive, and I was not prepared for that. I was like, okay, so think, like, what am I gonna do? And I found a couple of boutiques in the Boston area that were happy to sell me on consignment and just kind of on a rolling basis. And because I don't put anything on sale, they would just send me back anything once like they were in their sales period. And I realized that a lot of customers would buy something there and then come to my website and buy from me directly. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe I should do wholesale even in some sort of aspect, because even though I don't get a great margin, I still make a margin. And then this is technically another marketing strategy. So I was planning on going to a trade show, get more wholesale, all of that. And then COVID hit, and then everyone shut down. And then I was like, okay, so
Back to direct to consumer.
yeah, to direct to consumer. And basically for the past 4 months, I've been experimenting and brainstorming and trying to figure out the most cost-effective way of customer acquisition for direct to consumer. Because even if I do want to be in wholesale, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows if we're going to go in lockdown again? Who knows? So I felt like it made more sense to invest as much as I could into direct to consumer for right now.
Yeah. So talk about that process and like through your brainstorming and experimentation, like what you found out. Cause I think there's so many people, and I'm included, right? You see these like beautiful websites with these direct to consumer brands, and you just think like, oh, that went up in like a week. And there's a lot that goes on behind to make it, but to get you there, there's so much that goes behind the scenes. Like those Instagram ads that you don't even notice, like those are meticulously crafted. So can you talk through like what you've experimented with and what you've seen like glimmers of hope so far and things that haven't worked?
Yeah. So I've been really lucky to get a couple of, like Boston Globe did an article about me, and a couple of other local magazines like Boston Magazine. And I saw direct sales come through those. So I kind of had that little, oh, I just need more articles. But it's not just articles, it's the right articles with the right demographics, with the right readerships. So I kind of was like, oh, I should do PR and try to pitch journalists and all of that stuff. But I am awful at writing. Like that's for me to tell this beautiful story and to whatever, that's just not me. So it's really hard for me to like pitch and like do all of that. So I was like, okay, fine. This is my chance. Like, I'll just invest some money, hire a PR person, and try to get as many articles as possible. And in 3 months, basically nothing happened. So I don't know if it's more of a Corona was the only thing anyone talked about. Like, I don't know what the situation was, but it just felt like that wasn't really, the money didn't get really spent wisely. Then I was like, okay, basically every article I've gotten was through my own way around of it, of
Hustle.
just like harassing people and like hoping I'm nice enough that people will go recommend me at some point. So I kind of still would love to be featured in any sort of magazine and whatnot, but I think that's just going to have to be something that I have to really hone in and like pitch myself. And the new thing that I got a really great recommendation for these guys that do Facebook advertising. And because of COVID, a lot of brands have actually pulled out from their advertising. So from a year ago, it's a lot cheaper to advertise on Facebook and Instagram. So I figured, you know what, if this is the cheapest it's going to be, then like maybe I should try and see what's going to happen. It's only been about a month, but I've basically broken even-ish. So hopefully with all of the data that we've kind of gotten from these campaigns, we can kind of narrow it down and be profitable next month. But that's fingers crossed. Who knows? Other things have been trying to do like a virtual pop-up, which, I mean, it's hard. Like, how do you buy something off of a virtual pop-up if you don't have the platform that's like super easy with a one-click checkout when something pops up? It's a lot. I think everyone's on their screen all day long as is. I think everyone's sick of Zoom calls. I think everyone's kind of like over it a bit. And so I don't know how selling virtually is going to keep going. I'm excited to see where AR and all that goes, but I don't see it for right now. But yeah, it's tricky. I've been trying to do virtual fittings, which still is also kind of, people aren't super interested in taking their shirt off in front of a camera to measure themselves. Like, it's just totally normal. But yeah, so those are some of the things that have been going on, and just trying to continue brainstorming.
It's a grind out there.
Yeah, it's hard.
I feel like the first thing you mentioned, the earned media, that's been said on this podcast a few times. That's so important. Like being able, important. And getting it. There's no shortcut to earned media, right? It's like you have to build the relationships, follow the people on Twitter, interact with them, or whatever the channel is,
Yep.
and then hopefully at the right time they read an article. It's very difficult to get that. A couple ideas I had. Feel free to leave these on the cutting room floor if they're not good. One is like, have you thought about doing some kind of Instagram live?
Yeah, we do it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think the scarcity factor is really important for this generation. And if you did like an Instagram live where you had like you and a couple other people who might be different sizes, and you like showed like, all right, this is the piece that's dropping today. Like there's only 100, and like that kind of thing, I feel like would be compelling. But the problem is the internet seems so noisy right now with
It's so noisy.
so many things.
Yeah, and in general, all of our stuff is most of the styles are dead stock. So once a style is out, it's out, and it's already very limited, and then it never goes on sale. So it's kind of like the whole company is already set up in that kind of like scarcity type vibe. And yeah, I mean, even with Instagram Lives, so one of the virtual pop-up, it was great because I got to interact with a lot of people, but it just didn't bring direct sales because it's like you're on a Instagram virtual live and then you're gonna hop off. Yeah, like how do you go to buy stuff? Even as simple as like, how do I even know what link or what website to go to? And it's just I mean, I see on my Instagram throughout the day, every 20 minutes, someone's going live. It's just, after the first week of COVID, like I started checking out. I'm like, okay, this was kind of cool. And then I feel like it's just way too oversaturated.
Virtual shopping with any physical component seems super clunky right now.
It's so
There's
hard.
no technology for it yet.
And especially with like my product, a lot of it is so cool when you see it in person. It will be like a shimmery metallic or a really beautiful velvet, but no, even in a video, it's so hard to tell what it is. So we had been doing pop-ups all the way up through right before everything shut down, and the pop-ups were really successful because the moment people see it and just pick it up, they're like,
I need
that. This like feels luxury. This feels good. This looks really cool. Wow, the light's hitting it in such a way. Where online, it's like, even with a video, it's hard. It's just really, really hard, yeah.
So talking to you right now, so this is for people listening if they listen later, it's end of July 2020, so we're still in the midst of COVID. Talking to you right now is really interesting because I think apparel is one of the hardest hit places, especially brick and mortar. Is. So I'm curious to get your take on, because I have a couple hypotheses, but I want to hear your take on what do you think is going to happen to the big retailers and maybe, those massive ones, that's probably not where you're targeting, more like the boutique or higher end ones, but still there's these massive traffic, huge square footage places. What do you think is going to happen to those?
I mean, honestly, I keep going back and forth with it, but I still feel like two things. So like anyone that's huge, like multi-floors and whatnot, I think they're going to be a little bit more picky and cut down on inventory, so maybe their square footage will go down, but I still don't think brick and mortar as a whole is going anywhere. Like we will be out of this. Online is never going to replace human interaction. I mean, like it's never going to. So if it takes a year or 2 years or 6 months for us to get out of this, I still think stores are going to open up and people are going to go because they just want to go and touch and feel and just have that euphoria of purchasing something on a whim in that moment in a store. But I do think wholesalers are going to get a little bit smarter about what they purchase and how much they purchase. And I'm hoping the seasons in the fashion industry it just won't be like new every month. Like I'm hoping it'll also cut back. Like instead of having a spring and fall and summer and winter and resort and cruise and this and that and whatever extra drops, I think that hopefully brands will cut down and stores will cut down because once there's less inventory and less turnaround, there's going to be less sales. So there should be a longer like full price time frame for things to sell at. So I'm really hoping that will happen, but I don't think brick and mortar as like a general concept is going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think the brands are going to start like consolidating their bets a little bit and be less like strung out across so many things,
categories,
spread too thin.
Yeah, like just do what you do well and just continue like focusing on what you do well, like not going into home goods if you're great at doing high heels, like just kind of condensing everything.
Yeah. My hypothesis is that the pop-up shop type of like in and out, create the store for a week or so and then tear it down. I think that's going to really emerge. Like,
I agree.
I don't think owning or renting permanent space is going to make sense anymore. So like I could see brands almost creating like a on the go,
like a tour
kit or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what I think is going to happen.
Kind of like what Glossier is doing with all their little pop-up locations in different cities every couple months. I mean, especially with everything happening, I can't imagine anyone that's willing to put a lease for the next 10 years somewhere like that. Doesn't make any sense.
Totally. Another question I have for you, like broadly around the fashion industry, is I feel like there's a lot of excitement coming from the like sizeless or like super custom approach where like brands are making, there's not 5 sizes like you mentioned. There's as many as needed and like everything's custom made with all these new manufacturing techniques. What's your take on that? Do you think we're headed there or we already are there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I think it's just a logistical nightmare. So anyone who can figure out how to do it and do it well and at scale, it's one thing if you only have like an order a day and you're able to handle it. But what if you start getting into thousands and you start customizing everything too much? It gets really, really hard. And at the end of the day, it also depends on what price point you're at. So if you're at a lower price point, you're not going to be able to do that just physically. Like the manpower behind that is just too high. And if you also are doing that, you probably want to be able to overlook it. So does that mean you're going to be doing it in the States or are you going to do it overseas? But then if you're doing it overseas and everything's custom, then if you're doing it, say, in India, that means every individual package has to get delivered to a customer in the United States. Like that, the shipping costs will be crazy. It's really, there's so many moving parts, and understanding kind of how to be able to do that accurately and in a price point that people are willing to pay, because at the end of the day, there are amazing people that do alterations. So that's the other thing. I feel like it's hard too, because there are only so many brands that are doing such custom work that you're kind of like stuck in this specific style or category. Because I know a lot of like workwear dresses will do really custom to your form and you put in your measurements and they'll do it. But like, again, right now, who's getting custom workwear dresses? And like, that might not be that fun thing that you want to buy and splurge on. That might be this like, oh, I have to buy another like workwear dress. So I feel like it's really hard. And the same thing, like if you have an entire product line, are you going to offer that for every single item on your product line? That means like every single unit is going to be custom made. Like,
yeah, it's a nightmare logistically.
It's a nightmare. There are people doing it, and I've been following just because I'm like, I wonder how this is going to work out. But I couldn't imagine.
Along those lines, another question I had is, at any of the fashion houses you worked before, were you aware of like any like super innovative things they were trying or like experimenting with?
I guess I could say at Yeezy, but I definitely still have an NDA signed, so I'm not sure how.
Okay, fair. We'll keep it tight, but there's something.
There's something, yeah.
That's funny. I want to talk about like competition a little bit. So you said when you started, one of the reasons why you started was you looked around, there was no solution for you. Otherwise, you may have gone with that brand. But has that competitive landscape for what you're doing evolved at all? Or are you still the only shop in town that's doing that?
I do think there are more brands kind of either extending their sizes. So like brands that have already existed and they're like, okay, now we're going to like add another 10 sizes. And right as I was researching and kind of like setting everything up, another brand launched, and it was basically my concept, but still aesthetically, I feel like everything is so, it's like your basics, it's like your everyday, like white, nude, black. No one has really kind of hit that fun and bright in aesthetics, at least. And still everything has underwires. So I still feel like kind of my niche is having real bra sizes for a non-wire bra, and not just like bundling like 7 different sizes into this small and be like, yeah, I mean, we like, you stretch it out enough, like you could probably like fit like 8 different sizes into it. Where I've been like really meticulously like breaking out every size to like make sure that even though it's a bralette, it's going to legit fit you. But yeah, I'm like kind of trying to really hone in on that. And I keep like looking around and I'm like, okay, everyone still has like extra small through large. Like no one's doing like the sizes. I mean, there are a couple brands, but I mean, like in the grand scheme of the lingerie industry, there is not a lot.
If you're successful, there'll always be competition like coming in to try to take your market. What do you think in the fashion industry, what becomes a differentiator other than just like pure brand? Is it truly like getting it in front of people, having them touch the material, and just like the quality is better?
Great customer service, any sort of community feeling like, oh, I want to support this brand, being really open and honest. And I also feel like it's kind of like, okay, another brand pops up. Cool. There's enough women in the world to buy enough lingerie. So it's kind of like, especially with Victoria's Secret going really badly.
Yeah, the wrong direction.
In the wrong direction. And with them shutting down all of their stores, I mean, like for smaller brands, like all of us are getting more access to customers that are starting to drop off of Victoria's Secret. So it's kind of in the motion. I mean, it's just like the cycle of like fashion too. Like maybe in 10 years, my stuff won't be that cool if I don't change with the times. So I think it's just, there's enough room for everyone.
That's funny you say that. I have that same mentality that is like, people always talk about like they get really competitive with their friends. And I'm always like, look, there's enough room for success out there for you and every single one of your friends and all of their friends' friends to win. So if you like really want to get competitive with like all the people you don't know, but like support all the people you do. And like that's that same mentality. I think the market's huge. I like to ask kind of a like where you headed manifesting type question. And I know it's been a rough road the last few months, as it has been for a lot of people, but especially for the industry you're in. If you think about like in the next 5 to 10 years, where do you want Titov to be? What do you want it to look like when it grows up?
I would definitely love to have my own storefront. So as we were talking about brick and mortar, would love to be in like a national lingerie retailer, something like a Journal or international one like Net-a-Porter, just because anyone that shops there trusts in what they are carrying. So it just kind of gives you that mark of...
Yeah, the stamp of approval.
Yes, exactly. That would be really great. And building out a team, even if it's a small team, I would love to like have all that. And definitely, I hope that direct to consumer is more money generating than wholesale. So that way, if another pandemic happens, we'll be okay.
Is it just you right now, or do you have anyone else working on the team?
Yeah, so it's just me. My mom helps out like to sew some stuff.
Nice. Thanks,
which
Mom.
is really nice. And yeah, thanks, Mom. And then I have a intern.
Cool. What I was going to shift to is around hiring. And I ask a lot of people on the show, like, what characteristics do you look for? Like, what has been the proven, consistencies across the superstar people you've hired? But I'd love to get your take. Fast forward a couple of months or whenever you end up hiring the person you're looking for. In your mind today, just based on all the work you've done and roles you've held, what do you think are those characteristics that you will look for that first person you hire?
Definitely. I mean, I think about this a lot. Just even with my intern, she reached out to me and told me why she would benefit me. And for me, I was like, oh, that's awesome. I am so swamped with a million other things. Like, I don't want to be pulling teeth to like figure out why I should hire you or whatnot. So it was really nice that like this person came through and they were like, I'll take this off your plate. Here you go. And having a good attitude, having a I'll do whatever attitude is really big. I was always like that at any of my jobs. Like if I had to do something that was like basically below my pay grade, I still did it. And I did it with a smile on my face because at the end of the day, I want the company to succeed. Because if they don't, I don't get paid.
Yeah, that's
because
a good way to look at it.
I lose my job. So like I'm not going to be all weird and picky about the tiny tasks if it's just something that needs to get done for the benefit of the bigger picture. And I also just like nice people. Like I don't want to ever have to deal with someone that's like catty or trying to step over someone else. Like,
yeah, passive aggressive.
I'm so like beyond done with that kind of attitude. I just want someone that enjoys coming in, enjoys what they're doing, ready to get their hands dirty, like just positive. And especially these days when I'm kind of hiring on maybe like a consultant or something, my number one question is, so I'm going to pay you, but what's my return going to be? Because the only reason I'm hiring you is so I can grow and get that return. If I don't get a return on however much your fee is for the month, I'm going negative. I'm not making money. So like how does that make any sense? So for me, it's a lot of, even when I'm thinking about who my first like full-time hire would be, it's not going to be a designer. It's not going to be a stylist. It's most likely going to be a salesperson, because I need that person to have their entire job to bring money in. So until I'm not going to be hiring a production manager. Like that stuff does not matter, because I can handle that for right now. What matters is bring money in so that I can even pay them in the first place. So it's been really interesting, because that was definitely not my mentality even a year ago.
At the start, were you just like, look, if I just make beautiful products, I'll be set? Was that your initial mentality?
Well, at the start, it was more like, God, I'm so sick of doing production. I'd love to hire a production person. Kind of that stuff that I feel like, I don't want to deal with factories. Like, I wish someone else would take it over. But then as months go by, I'm like, wait a second, like I'm not selling anything. Like I can't hire someone to do that. And then with every week, with every month that goes by, I'm like, okay, never mind. Like I can do the production, but now I need to kind of think of other people to hire.
Yeah, that's a really good point you made about your intern. And I think for people listening who either lost their job because of coronavirus or graduated college and then haven't gotten a job because of the crazy environment we're in, could you share a little more about like what actually did he or she say in the email to you? Like what tactical things did they say? Like, look, I can do this. Because I feel like unless they had particular industry experience where they know exactly like what you're probably going through and what you don't like doing, they're kind of taking a shot in the dark, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what did they say?
So she basically kind of approached it in a different way. Because I grew up in Boston, I went to school in Boston, I know that there is no fashion in Boston, or like it's slim pickings. So the way that she approached it was, hey, like I found you and like you seem like a legit fashion company and I don't know where you came from, and like can we just get coffee and like just see like if there's some way I can help you out. And I happened to be in the city, in the area, and I was like, okay, I'll meet with you. We'll see. I went into it completely being like, I don't have time to even think about what to give to an intern. Like I was like, I'm just going to talk to her, kind of whatever. And we ended up sitting down. We ended up talking for maybe over an hour, and just in conversation, we keep realizing how similar we are to each other. So she got lucky. Like I was talking to her and I was like, you sound like me. Like you have that hustle. I can tell based on like what you're saying, the fact that like you're ready to go. Like she was just so willing to work and was inspired. And she was like, it's been so hard to find like something really fashion specific in the city. And I saw her portfolio and I was like, oh, looks like she has talent. So I was like, you know what? Cool. Like let's start and see where it goes, kind of a thing. But so many times we'll be talking and I'm like, oh, you are a mini me. Like, it's really weird. So I think she got really lucky with me almost in a sense. And I got lucky with her because it was just, we're on the same page. I don't even have to say what I need. She already knows. Like, it's clicked really, really well.
That's awesome. So kind of a segue to that, you're kind of like a mentor to her.
Mm-hmm.
A question I would have is, along the way, what's the best piece of advice you've gotten from any mentor or other, founders that you've looked to for advice?
Probably be nice. And that's kind of what I keep trying to hound to everyone I talk to, because it's unbelievable how many friends have just pulled through. Both Boston Magazine and Boston Globe were based on someone else recommending me. I got an email today to join a chapter of a woman's business thing. And the opening sentence was, my friend spoke highly of you. I'd love to kind of introduce you to this organization. And it's just constantly that, as long as you're nice and you're genuine and you're not like, oh, I'm the coolest thing and like I'm the best and whatnot, but you're humble and just genuinely curious and always want to learn and always want to help other people, that same kind of karma will always come back to you. And I feel like someone had told me that, and I feel like it's been told to me so many times that now I really preach it, because it's unbelievable how many times something really, really good has come out of me just being nice.
I totally agree with that. That's like so underrated. I feel like people sometimes think like
It's
they
really,
feel like
really underrated.
they're too cool for school, like too soon. Wait, I mean, you should never not be nice, but like way too soon. People are like, I can't talk to you, like whatever.
Yeah.
I just think it's so ridiculous. So I totally agree.
Yeah, and I've been guest lecturing a lot. There was a bunch of different schools, and a lot of the times the teachers are like, a lot of the students are like, oh, I got into the school, I'm already like the best.
Yeah, I'm already it.
I'm already it. And it's like, well, you're going to graduate and no one's going to care. So like you need to kind of snap out of that really fast, because like life's going to hit you and no one's going to care if you went to school X, Y, or Z. Like it does not matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Especially in today's day and age, it does not matter. Yeah, I totally agree. A kind of yin and yang question for you. So one is, can you recall like a story or experience that has just been like your most frustrating or difficult moment as a founder thus far? And like the yang would be like a validating moment where you felt like just so proud and like you took a step back and just couldn't believe how far you've come.
I would definitely say the hardest has been customer acquisition, just getting it in front of people. It's like a daily thing. It's the only thing I think about. I fall asleep thinking about it. I wake up thinking about it, and it's slowly killing me, maybe. But definitely, I mean, just getting it in front of people and like realizing how saturated everything really is. That realization has been really, really hard to kind of accept. So I would definitely say that. But the best thing is I had someone, long story, but basically this girl ended up seeing my business deck and kind of ideas of what I wanted to implement for my personal business. And she happened to work for a private equity company, and she reached out being like, I would love to possibly pitch you to some VCs because I'm really impressed with your company. And I am not looking for funding. I don't want to raise funding. That was like a decision I had made from the get-go, but I still like had a conversation with her, and she was super sweet. But it was like after that conversation that I was like, I think I'm doing something right.
I'm curious to double click on the funding piece. So why did you make that decision? And is that kind of like throughout forever with the company, or you just in this initial stage, you just don't want to take on funding?
Basically, whenever I do anything, I like research the hell out of it. So I initially was like, oh, I'm going to make sure my LLC is in the right state, because if I do funding, like I need to make sure that a VC is going to be happy with my
filing
all the things. Yeah. And like, what does a business deck for pitching my business to a VC even look like? And I mean, I did all the research, I did all the things. And then the more and more I thought about it, it kept kind of coming back to that question of, I basically was like, what are my values, and like, why am I starting this company in the first place? And the biggest answer for me is I want to be my own boss. I want to be on my own schedule. I want to be the one that's making all of the decisions. And I would like to have less anxiety in my life than more. And I feel like the moment a VC person comes in, they are automatically, whether they're not like an official boss, they're your boss because you are spending their money. So between spending their money and being anxious of like, oh my God, like I'm spending someone else's money and what if this doesn't work out? And then having to answer to someone. And then it was also kind of realizing like, oh, if someone invests in you, they want to sell, and they want to sell for a lot in as short amount of time as possible, which means, cool, so I'm going to do all of this hard work for the next 7 years and then I'm going to sell it. And it just, for me, it didn't sit right. Like I really wanted to like build something that is going to be my little company, my baby, and I want to be with it through the end all, and basically like retire doing this. I didn't really want to just like do that rapid growth and then maybe you're profitable, maybe you're not. And what if you get VCs and it doesn't work out? I mean, all of that just sounded awful to me. So I really specifically was like, no, I don't want to raise. I would much rather go slow and steady. actually become profitable, not just aim on growth and kind of invest in itself for as long as I need. And as long as I keep going at it, it should grow, and it has been. And I hit break even in March. So as of 2020, I have not put any of my personal money into it. So I just basically have to keep going. And if it finally becomes big enough in the next 5 years instead of next year, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's really fresh perspective that I really appreciate. And I think the default for people these days is like, okay, how much money have you raised? Like raise, raise, raise. If you really need money, you could just get a loan from the bank
You
at
just
super low interest rates.
And then you still own all
Own
of
everything.
your business. That's the thing that like I feel like it's really glamorized right now between media and like Shark Tank and all that stuff.
Totally.
And I think like all these direct to consumer brands raising so much money and being on the cover of every Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine is kind of, I don't want to say brainwashing, but it's kind of overlooking the real struggles with raising money. And I also don't think every industry does. I think if you're in medical equipment, you probably do. Or if you're trying to build a vaccine, you probably need to raise money because there's a lot of money that needs to go into it. But a fashion company, you really don't.
Especially if you have the skills that you have, which you can build the products
Exactly.
from scratch by yourself.
Like I don't need to hire on an entire product development team. As long as I can get my materials not at astronomical volumes, then even my production costs are low.
Another question for you is, if you could teleport back to the first couple months you were starting, what are some things that you would tell yourself? And I caveat this with, you needed to go through the struggles you went through to get to where you are today, so you have that realization, but still, like, knowing certain things would have been very helpful, I'm sure.
Definitely. I would say start sooner. I wish I started sooner. Like I already had kind of a product, but I kept being like, oh, it's not perfect, or the website's not perfect, or this isn't perfect, or my shipping envelopes aren't perfect. But the moment I launched it, nothing really happened. So I'd get an order here and there, mostly kind of friends just purchasing and support while I was figuring it out. But I kind of wish I did that much earlier, because then at least it would have been live. Google would have started to see it much earlier, because especially once I made it live, I was like, why don't I show up on Google? And then every article goes, oh, it's going to take like 5 months. So like there's little things like that. My initial project was actually a sleep mask, just because I was like, oh, this is easy, no sizes. I can just have this up and kind of just as a placeholder. I could have done that, I mean, months prior. So I kind of wish I just would have done more of it. And I also wasn't really promoting it, because I was like, oh, but it's not live. It's not perfect. I don't want anyone to see it in this like half final stage. And I really wish I wasn't so scared to kind of like start talking about it and to start pushing it and start promoting it. Even like Instagram, like I do a post here and there, like, oh, behind the scenes, like something, but I wish I really focused on it. I feel like I had more time back then, so I could have like built out a better Instagram platform. I could have started reaching out. I could have just at least figured out the nooks and crannies of like the back end of the website as well. I would have seen that sales aren't going, so maybe I would have done wholesale a bit earlier. So it just like, wish I would have started earlier.
Totally. It's funny how, like, I face the same thing. My girlfriend, who launched like a fitness Instagram, was the exact same way. Like, she's like, I'm not going to promote this on my personal page until it's like yada, yada, yada.
Done. Yeah.
Like far. And it's crazy how a lot of us are like, there's very few people that are willing to just put out like a half-baked thing and like not care.
Mm-hmm.
But that's so important, because if you think about like the graph, if the graph of success is like that exponential curve, you just want to get started on that low part as soon as possible, because then you'll grow.
And like no one sees your post.
Like, no
one's looking. They'll see it for a half a second and never think about it again. So it's like, it's just so silly.
Yeah, it's also so noisy online that like literally no one will see it anyway.
Yeah.
Like even if you wanted them to, they won't. So like it's better to get in the habit of like getting consistent and learning. A couple questions like a little bit less related to your business directly, but what are some other brands and companies that you look up to and admire?
Definitely Glossier. I know they're also like a direct-to-consumer VC kind of golden child. But I love what they did with their community. I think people really love them. I love that they're doing the pop-up rotation of a different city every couple months. I think their packaging, their branding, their product SKUs are really great. I also think so. One of the other new lingerie brands is Cup that came out, and I think they have done a really great job in their branding and their whole kind of mission statement and size range and all of that too. I'd say those two for sure. And of course, like Spanx, like she was completely self-funded. She didn't even know VC was an option. Like her whole story is just so inspirational.
She's a legend. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, can you name like one product other than, of course, the Titov line that you can't live without? Like one for personal life and then one for like business, like a software tool or something like that.
Oh, I mean, for business is like my entire Adobe suite. I always have this conversation that I hate that they went into subscription because I literally going to be just giving Adobe money for the rest of my life. Like, cool. Brilliant on their part. Like, good for you for making a subscription to your product. But for me, I'm like, personal life, my French press. Let's do that because I have to start my mornings off right.
Nice. All right, 3 more questions for you. The first one is learning and resources. So what books, newsletters, podcasts, or follows on social media or any other resources would you recommend for either someone who's like an aspiring founder, interested in entrepreneurship, or fashion apparel?
Yeah, I have so many. I would definitely say Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, was really great. It's just so inspirational. Like the whole thing is like wild. And The Lean Startup was recommended to me, and I think that kind of is where my idea of like starting sooner kind of came through as well. Like as I started reading that, I was like, man, I really should have started sooner and leaner and spend less money and see what's working and what's not before you invest so much money in something that ends up not being the right thing. Business of Fashion is an online resource that's really great. They have courses, they have articles. I read them every single day. It's really way more about the business side versus just like, oh, here's like a spring collection of something. EDX was really great for taking a few Babson classes for just like business 101. I took a couple of them and I was like, oh, I know what B2B is and B2C and like all these weird terminology things that at the time I wasn't really sure about. I took those like 2 years ago and I was like, I feel a lot better reading like a Bloomberg magazine now because I feel like I actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, now you know. Okay, final 2 questions for you. So excited to get your take on these. We ask these to every guest. So this is the common theme across all the episodes. So the first one is our startup manifesto. So if you had to write a startup manifesto with 5 of the most important key lessons or pitfalls to avoid when starting out, what would they be?
The first one for me was I wish I had a little bit more experience with sales and PR, or just kind of any customer acquisition channels, and kind of learned at a different company and like seeing how it was done properly. The second one, I would say, just in general, especially if it's someone that's in college, go work for someone, learn all your mistakes on someone else's dime. I'm so grateful that I had all of the jobs that I did because I learned not only what the proper thing was to do, I also saw like companies that weren't doing well, like what not to do. So I would definitely say work, get that experience. And also while you're working, you're networking. So you're building out this like amazing foundation that later on that they can recommend you when you do end up starting your own thing. And then the don't wait until it's perfect situation. I really think that's like a huge one. Number 4, you better love what you do because I am so exhausted. I work 24 hours every day. I'm always thinking about work. Even if I'm not like physically in my studio, I'm always thinking about it. But at the same time, I mean, I love it. Like I don't know what else I would be doing. And I think that's really, really important, because you can burn out really quickly if it's something that you're really not into. And definitely my big, big one is be nice. It's also like, I mean, the world is so messed up as is. Like, you don't want to be like that person that adds on to that.
Just be nice.
Just be nice.
That's the motto to live by. That's great. That's a great list. So the second question is your nomination. We've been doing this every episode, and we've built like a really, really awesome cohort of founders that have come on. So I'm excited to hear yours. So it's your turn to nominate another founder that is either a friend, colleague, or mentor of yours that you'd like to see on the show in the future.
Yeah, I would definitely nominate Shannon Felt. She is one of my good friends, and she is just super inspiring. She has her own TEFL Horizons company, and it's a website and a podcast, and it's a whole community dedicated to making quality teacher training for English and making it accessible worldwide. So we're always talking about kind of marketing strategies and whatnot, and it's so fascinating how she does everything.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to her. So before we wrap, I just want to acknowledge you for a second. I think in hearing your stories and listening to the conversation, just your grit is really inspiring, especially in these last few months. I think it's been a brutal time for a lot of early stage startup founders, but especially in the apparel industry is crazy. And I think just hearing the way you like attack a problem, try something, might not work, switch, try something else, just like that grittiness, I think is really, really inspiring. And hopefully everyone who listens to this episode can take that away as something that's impactful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Of course. Before you go, do you want to just plug your website and social media so people know where to go to follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website and social and basically any channel, it's always Titov label, and Titov is spelled Titov. It's a version of my last name, basically.
Got it. Cool. Masha Titova, founder of Titov. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to that episode with Masha Titova of Titov. Remember, if you want to support the show, there's a couple quick things you could do that would really help us out. 1, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts. When you go on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a 5-star rating and a couple sentence positive review on why the show inspired you. These ratings and reviews are super important. I know they don't seem like it, but they signal to Apple that they should put our show in front of other people that might like it. 2, follow us on social, mainly Instagram, @FounderPodcast. Each week we put out teasers, audio clips, and important quotes from the episode. And lastly, check out our website as a mission control for the show. Go to thefounderpod.com. We have a page on there called Special Offers where we link up all the discount codes across all the episodes we've had, as well as the books and resources that have been recommended from our founders. I hope you enjoyed that episode and are looking forward to the next one. Until then, I'm Kallaway, and this is The Founder.